Hello, welcome to this brief overview video of the Simplement Data Director. So now that we've successfully connected the data director to the correct target server and database, we can now get into some of the details of the data director. So in this video, we're going to focus on the Dictionary Explorer subtool, which is one of the most important subtools and one of the most useful. So it allows you to browse your SAP metadata via the dictionary tables. So to open the Dictionary Explorer or any of these other subtools, you simply click on its green highlighted name. It'll open up a new window, and we now have the Dictionary Explorer open. The Dictionary Explorer is a really powerful metadata browser of any and all SAP tables in your SAP environment. Enough talking about how the tool works, so let's actually start using it. So I'm going to choose an SAP table and start browsing its metadata. In this case, I'm going to use the SAP table VBAK, but you can use any table you want. And this even includes, sort of custom Z tables or non-standard SAP tables. If it's a table in your SAP system, you can browse it here. It does not matter. So now I'm going to put in the table name, VBAK in this case, and hit search. In this case, I'm using the default search criteria. I'll talk about the different options in a moment, though. So it'll search the system. We see it already found the table. It'll give you the raw table name, and it'll also give you the description. Just a quick note about description, that's something important to keep in mind. This is fed from your SAP system, and when we installed the Liberator, it was configured to use one language. So in this case it's English, but this description can be generated in whatever languages are defined in your SAP system. So it could be English, Spanish, German, French, Russian, etc. Whatever languages you have available can be configured to show up here in this description field. So before I go into more detail, let's take a moment to talk about the different search criteria. So the default is table name starts with, and in this case I typed the full table name because I knew it. But if you can imagine, you're not always going to know the raw SAP table name, so maybe I just know it starts with VBA. You can search with that as well. You can see here it's picking up multiple tables because there's multiple tables that fulfill that condition of starting with VBA. There's actually a number of options besides just table name starts with. If you hit the drop down, you can see here you can do table name equals. If you know the exact name, you can just use that. You can do table name contains if you just know a portion. It doesn't even have to be the beginning portion. It can be any portion of the table name. You can also search by column names. That's a little less user-friendly though, because there's hundreds if not thousands of tables that might have the same column name. But if you want, you can search by that. The default is table name starts with, and that's probably good for most cases though. So at this point we found the table we want, VBAK, but we're not really seeing that much information about it, and that's because all we need to do is double click on it, and now it'll open a new window. And in this window we can really start drilling down into a lot of the metadata details of VBAK or whatever other table you have selected. So let's start doing that now, starting with the columns node, and then we'll move through parent and child relationships. Actually, before we even dig into these folders, let's just look at the table header itself because we can get some useful information from that. There's a tooltip that'll sort of temporarily stand up. It'll show some information. One of the important things is either in the tooltip or just visually, you can tell if this table is under replication or not. So you can see here it's outlined in green. That indicates that it is replicated. If it was not replicated, there would be no green outline. But maybe you're colorblind, or maybe that's just hard to see, or you don't want to look for the colors. If you just right click, you can also hit properties, and this will definitively tell you is it replicated or not, as well as give you some other information about the table. So some of the other important information that you can gather from this properties pop-up is the table class. In this case, VBAK is a base table. But for those who are familiar, there are also different types of tables in SAP, things like cluster and pool tables. But those come up more in some different videos, but just know that you can find that information here. And then an other important field that in this case doesn't apply to the table VBAK, but will apply to a lot of tables, is the text table. And this is where you can get a lot of the descriptions for columns in that table. So in this case it's blank. If there were a text table, it would be populated here. So that's enough for the table properties. Now let's get into the folders. Let's start with the column folder. If you just double click this, it'll expand, And VBAC, like many SAP tables, as you can see as I scroll through here, has a lot of columns. Some SAP tables have hundreds of distinct columns. So if you want, you can just scroll through and look at the column names. And just a quick note, much like the table name itself, here we see the raw column name as well as a more human-friendly generated description name, and just like the table name, this is defined by the language that is set up earlier. So in this case it's English. It can be anything though. Also right here you can see here we clearly mark which columns in a table are the primary key with a little key icon, and then all these other columns have different sort of regular icons. But you can visually tell right away what's a key column and what is not. As we've all seen though, there are a lot of columns in this table, and that's not really that friendly to look through, but what we can do is we can easily filter that. If we right click on columns, you can filter by the SAP data type. Just keep in mind this is not a SQL data type, this is the data type in the SAP system. But it is helpful for these big tables like VBAC, or a table like the Material Master or the General Ledger that has hundreds of distinct columns. Maybe you only want to look at the date columns in VBAC, so you can do that. You just hit dates and now it'll filter it down. There's only a dozen or so. So just like we could right click on the table itself and see properties, we can also do that on any column to see individual column properties if that's something we need to know. Let's click on this AEDAT changed on, and we can see all sorts of information like the SQL data type, the SAP data type, whether it's a primary key, the description, etc. From this right click we can also actually search for similar columns in other tables. We could say find columns with the same name. It'll bring us back to the search window that we were at earlier. Like I mentioned, there's a huge number of results because this is a pretty common column, but if you want, you can search that way. So let's move on from columns because we've gone over most of the basics. You can just close this folder if you want, or you can clear the filter. You can just close it though, it doesn't matter. So now let's move on to parent and child relationships, which are really, in most cases, more useful and provide more interesting information than just looking at the columns themselves. So I'll start with parents. So right here on AUFK, just like we could with VBAC, we can also just expand columns and parent relationships, and you can keep going on and on and on. But that can get a little confusing to look at, actually, to have these sort of nested folders. What we can do, if we decide that we want to look into more detail at AUFK or any other table, you can simply right click and say Explore on New Tab, and now the data director will open that table in a brand new tab. And so it's just like VBAC, except now we're over here on a new window, so it's kind of easier to keep separate from each other. So now we have a couple tables on different tabs. You don't have to use tabs, or you can use 10 or 20 different tabs if you want. It's really up to you. So you can really go crazy looking through all the parent relationships if you want. And then it's the exact same process for child relationships. You just double click to expand. You can see all the child columns that point to different tables. In this case, because it's VBAC, there's not that many children tables, but it depends on the table. But there are some, so if I click on it, I see here what the table is, whether it's replicated. I can open that on a new tab, or I could just keep it here and keep drilling down into columns and the parents of the child and that sort of thing. So you can really go, sort of as deep or as shallow as you want into the parent and child relationships. One of the things that is really helpful as a sort of jump start to get you going on actually using these tables and creating a data model that'll include this relationship is if you right click on any of these column names in the parent or child subfolder, it'll give you the option to get join SQL on clipboard, and what this will do is the tool will automatically generate the conditions for a join between the two tables. So it'll generate the conditions for a join between VBAC and AUFK, the order master data. If I open Notepad, I already clicked that so it copied it. I can just paste. We'll see here, these are the conditions. I'll do client to client and order number to order number. And you can do that for any of these parent or child relations. This join generation feature is a really powerful feature of the tool, and it allows you to sort of bridge the gap from the sort of conceptual navigation of the data model of, okay, I see this column points to the order master data, to actually generating a SQL statement that will create that relation in a view or a table or a stored procedure that will power some report or downstream process that needs this relation or whatever the relation happens to be. And so this really illustrates the value of the Dictionary Explorer as a whole, that it allows you to both conceptually browse the data model that SAP has created with all the complicated relations between sales tables, material master tables, general ledger, etc. But it'll also give you a jump start on how to actually start developing that in your SQL database for actual consumption by reports or downstream processes. And with that, we've pretty much covered the main tools and features and various functionalities of the Dictionary Explorer, which is just one of many tools within the Data Director. So in the subsequent videos, we'll go into each and every tool within the Data Director. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.